What's up everyone, the Game2K2 here again, and today I continue my review of the Tony Hawk's franchise with Tony Hawk's Underground. While Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 brought some new gameplay mechanics to the career mode, Underground completely does away with the career mode. The career mode is now replaced by a new mode called Story Mode. This is the first Tony Hawk's game in the franchise to be a story-based game. In this story, you play a custom character where you and your friend Eric Sparrow try to make your way up the skateboarding world and become pros. As you slowly make your way up throughout the story, you meet certain pros and various other skaters. You go through competitions, you gain new sponsors, and you go through several different cities. Since this is the first time that Neversoft has had to deal with the storyline in the franchise, it makes sense that the story is not very good by gaming standards. But overall, it's not terrible either. I think the only real problem that really hurts the story is that it's not very long. Granted, the first 4 Tony Hawk games weren't necessarily long either, but the story mode for Underground can easily be beaten within 7 to 8 hours. Besides the story mode, the gameplay mechanics are very much the same as the mechanics that were introduced in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. You have to meet various characters throughout the levels and complete the missions that they give you to progress through the game. However, Underground introduces one new mechanic that has been long awaited since the very start of the series, and that's being able to get off the skateboard. It's actually pretty cool to be able to get off the board and walk throughout the levels now. You can also climb fences, onto roofs, and jump onto various things throughout the game with this feature. However, I'm a little disappointed that the missions in the game didn't really use this feature too often. It's really only the first level that uses it in the missions. A few new tricks have been added to the trick list this time around. The wall plant is pretty simple, with you just jumping and pushing yourself off a wall and trying to do a combo along with it. The hip transfer is a lot like the spine transfer, just at an angle. Then there's the acid drop, which is also like the spine transfer, except you can transfer from a flat surface to a half pipe instead of just half pipe to half pipe. To be honest, as cool as the new tricks are, they seem a little lackluster compared to the tricks that were introduced in previous games. To me, it seemed like they started running out of ideas when Underground released. One of my main complaints about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 was that it never really got progressively harder. It was always a juggling act between the game being incredibly easy to being incredibly difficult, depending on the mission that you got. Underground doesn't have this problem. In fact, Underground's problem is that it's really not very difficult at all. Underground's missions are a lot more straightforward when compared to anything seen in the previous games. It really doesn't take a lot to progress throughout the game, which is kind of surprising. I think the main problem with the missions is that the missions have been switched around to fit the storyline. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 through 4 did not have a story, so they could create any mission whatsoever. Now there was a story to write around, so some of the missions were kind of watered down and were very simple. That's not to say that some of the missions weren't tough. The one mission that stands out in my mind is from the very first level when you have to drive the car. Neversoft definitely wasn't going for realism with this car because it's a pain in the ass to steer. The levels are actually pretty cool. They're both big and have plenty of features to keep you busy in both story mode and free skate. My 2 favorite levels have always been New Jersey and Hawaii. New Jersey is just a great level with great detail and some cool features. Hawaii is just packed with stuff to do and see as well. You can also unlock 2 older levels from previous games. You can unlock the school and Venice Beach from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. It's just cool to see these levels with a complete graphical makeover, and I'm a huge fan of the school. So I was very excited to unlock that level in Underground. From a graphical standpoint, each version looks pretty much the same, but there are a few smaller differences that separate each one. The PC version is easily the best version out of all of them. The graphics are smooth, the sound is awesome, the loading times are great, and the frame rate is very steady. Coming in a close second is the Xbox version, which is almost every bit as good as the PC version. Everything is intact except for the frame rate, which is a bit jumpy. The PS2 version has the steadiest frame rate when it comes to the console versions, and the sound is really good as well. However, one of the noticeable differences is that the graphics aren't quite as sharp as the Xbox version. They're a bit glitchy, and the colors are not quite as good. Also, the loading times are not quite as good either. The Gamecube version is very much like the PS2 version, but the graphics don't hold up so well. The character models are not quite as sharp, and the sound is not the best. Now, as extreme as those differences might sound, they really are small because each version is playable and all are fun. The controls on the skateboard are pretty much the exact same for each version as they were before. The controls for off the skateboard are actually very good for each version. The controls for when you're off the skateboard are very simple and easy to remember for each version. Overall, Tony Hawk's Underground is an entertaining entry into the series. While the game is not exactly the hardest in the world and does leave some room for improvement, it should be easy for fans of the series to like this game. Well everyone, that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening and tune in next time as I continue my review of the series with Tony Hawk's Underground 2.